4 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, September 16th, it marked the 94th anniversary of the martyrdom of one of those great heroes. His name is the Lion of the Desert, Omar Al-Mukhtar. Omar Al-Mukhtar, rahimahullah. So tonight we're just going to have a very brief overview of his life and his jihad, his struggles in the way of Allah, and some of the lessons from his beautiful character, which I think is the most important thing we can learn, inshaAllah ta'ala. Omar Al-Mukhtar, he was born in Libya, which is in North Africa. And he grew up in a very pious household. His father passed away going for Hajj. So like so many of our heroes, like the Prophet ﷺ himself, he grew up an orphan. In Islam, an orphan is somebody whose father has died. So he had to depend on himself. But his care was given to one of the scholars in the area. And so he was raised up as part of something known as the Sanusi movement. The Sanusi movement, there was a scholar from Algeria, his name was Sanus, and he started a revival of Islam. If you know, around that time, 1800s, 1860, Islam was in a very weak state. And so some scholars were reviving Islam. So Sanusi, he started a spiritual revival, but it also had social connections, and we'll talk a little bit about it. And so he started lodges in places where people could go and learn about Islam, schools, and all over North Africa, especially in Libya, Algeria, Morocco. And Omar Mukhtar, he learned in one of those schools. And he was very sharp, very intelligent. And the purpose of these schools was not just to teach people Islam, but to train them to go throughout Africa and spread the message of Islam, to learn it and to go and be a teacher of Islam. So Omar Mukhtar, rahimahullah, he learned Islam and he was very sharp, very intelligent, and he memorized the Qur'an, and he went to Egypt where he met one of the founders of the second, I believe his name is Imam Muhammad Al-Mahdi, which was one of the leaders of the Sanusi movement. And he heard about Omar Mukhtar and how smart he was, how brave he was, how generous he was. And so he gave him a Qur'an. He gave him a Qur'an and he said, make this your everyday companion. Every day, read it. Never leave it. So Omar Mukhtar, he took that Qur'an and he kept it, and he would wake up every night and recite. And anybody who was with him, they said he would sleep 3-4 hours, and then get up at night, start reading Quran, standing before Allah, crying in front of Allah. And he would do khatam of the Quran once every week, never stopped. Even some of the companions said I traveled with him and we were tired and we were in a camp, in a tent, we've been traveling, and he woke us up in the middle of the night. He said, get up, let's pray tahajjud. And he had that discipline and that devotion to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 1862, Omar Al-Mukhtar was born. He learned in the Jaghbub Institute. That was the name of the Zawiya. They call them Zawiyas, corners, literally. But it was a place where people would go to learn about Islam. And it truly did bring up amazing personalities. In 1894, now he's about 30 years old, he traveled to Sudan to spread Islam. And he was with some, he traveled to Sudan to fight against some of the colonialists. At that time, the Italians, they invaded Libya. The British, they invaded parts of Egypt. The French, they invaded Chad and Algeria. So the Europeans, this is called the colonial ages, the Europeans were taking over the Muslim world. They were taking it over from the Ottoman Empire, stealing away the lands because they wanted the resources and they wanted to get labor and a market for their products. So they started occupying. And also when they occupied, they spread their philosophies and they installed their puppets in those lands. So Omar Al-Mukhtar, this is when he was young, he goes to to Sudan. And one of the interesting stories about him is that they were going with some people, some businessmen in a caravan, and there's a narrow valley, and they said this is a very dangerous area because there's a lot of lions in the area. So the people who were with him in the caravan, they said, everybody, let's collect some money and we'll buy a sick or a weak camel. Let the camel go first. The lion will be busy with the camel, and then we can pass through. So Omar Al-Mukhtar, they asked him, what's your opinion? He said, do you think I refuse to give taxes to the Europeans who occupy us, and I'm going to give taxes to this lion? I'm going to give my money to buy a camel to give to this lion? I'm going to go first. And so they started going forward. And when they got close, one of the businessmen, he said, Omar, come back. I'll give it from my own pocket. Don't put yourself in danger. And he refused. He said, I will do it myself. He went forward, and a lion actually did come out, and he shot the lion. He had a rifle with him, but the lion was still injured, but it still attacked him. And then he shot it again, and he killed it. And then he skinned it, and he put its body there as a warning to the rest. So that was how he was as a young man. He was very brave. They always say, the ulama say, that bravery and generosity are always together. And stinginess and cowardness are always together. Subhanallah. So you find somebody who's generous, you'll find they're also very courageous. Subhanallah. And he had those very, very beautiful qualities. Now, in the year 1897, he came back to his hometown. This area is in Libya. It's called the Green Mountains, Jabal Al-Akhdar. That's where we're going to have the rest of our stories all takes place in Jabal Al-Akhdar. So Omar Mukhtar, he was in those mountains where he led the Zawiya of that area. He was appointed as the Imam, basically, of that area. He was a scholar. He was knowledgeable. And during this time, you see his wisdom. He used to settle the disputes between the tribes. He united them. Just like last week, Sheikh Hamza told us how Yusuf ibn Tashfin, he revived Islam. Omar took the knowledge and he started teaching the Bedouins of Libya, teaching the tribal people about Islam. He took advantage of that, and he gave them knowledge, and he built up the strength, and he unified them. And so in 1906, he went to fight the British in the Egyptian border. And he began his jihad in fighting against the colonizers, and he fought the British. And in 1911, that's when the Italians they started taking over Libya, and he began fighting against them. And he had many battles against them. The Battle of Salawi, and the jihad would continue for more than 20 years against the Italians. Now the Italians is a very powerful country. They have money, they have machine guns, they have tanks. They have airplanes. At this time, in the 1910, they started building airplanes. And I wanted to mention, actually, there's so many parallels between what's happening in Gaza today and what happened in the time of Omar Al-Mukhtar. Very, very many parallels you'll see shortly. But the Italians had much more superiority. They had jets, they could drop bombs, they had tanks. Omar Al-Mukhtar, he had horses and some rifles and some basic weapons they would smuggle from Egypt, and they would use hit-and-run tactics, guerrilla tactics. They would hide in the caves, and then when the Italians would come, they would come down from the mountains, and they would use guerrilla tactics, attack the Italians, then go back into the mountains again. And he would do this, attacking the Italians. The Italians, in their part, they would carpet bomb the villages. They attacked the women. They violated the sanctity of the women, and they tried to gain a hand. They couldn't defeat Omar Mukhtar and his forces, so they decided to change their tactics. They said, "We're not going to defeat Omar. His people have a lot of faith. They have a lot of iman. They're not going to give up just by an army trying to occupy their country. This has never worked. Actually, people don't learn from history. Colonizers could never defeat the people because the tribes were with him. and the people, the hearts of the people with him. This is our land, and you're trying to take over our land. So they said, instead of trying to defeat Umar, they started to bribe some of the people in Libya to come to their side. And they used to give them bribes, they give them positions, and that didn't work either. So then what do? They tried to bribe Omar Mukhtar himself. They sent him a message. They said, you know what, we'll appoint you as a ruler here in Libya. We'll give you money, we'll give you a beautiful house, we'll give you whatever you want. Just join our side. Like some other Libyans did. Umar Mukhtar radiallahu anh, he wrote back and he said, this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our land, this is a jihad. No matter what you give me, I will either win victory against you or I will die fighting you. He refused to take any of their money. And so he continued the ambushes. 1924, 1925, there was a lot of small ambushes. And then the Italians, they started burning the land and killing the cattle to starve the people to what they're doing in Gaza today, right? Blocking all the borders, cutting the olive trees, what they do now. They burned the land, and Umar, he evacuated the women and children and the elderly, and so he could fight them himself with the Mujahideen. Now, very important at this point in 1928 time, the tribal networks. So he made different centers around the tribes, and each tribe had its own independent administration. He appointed a leader. They had their own. There was decentralized. This is very important, so they can't just kill the leader and destroy everything. And he went to a battle called the Battle of Bilal, the Well of Bilal, and the Battle of Ghabi in 1928. And he ambushed the Italians in the Black Mountains. He got a lot of their weapons, a lot of their money, and the Italians had armored trucks. So they would come and with their armored trucks, and they would have machine guns. But the Mujahideen, they had their rifles, and they would rain them down from upper positions from the mountains, and they were able to defeat them and take their weapons and capture many of their vehicles. So now the Italians, what did they do now? Everything has failed so far. They tried to bribe him. They tried to separate them into two groups, and we know what's happening in Palestine now. They try to separate them into two groups, the side that will work with them, and then defeat the side that will fight them. That didn't work, so they said, we have to build an enormous fence around them. Does this sound familiar? They said the guy, his name is I think Graziani. Graziani is the Italian. The Italians were following Mussolini at this time. Mussolini was like Hitler's part. They were fascists. So Mussolini sent Graziani, and he was a very tough, evil guy. So he said, let's build a fence, all 300-kilometer fence, block the ocean, block Egypt, any way that they're getting food from any other place, and we'll starve them out. We'll cut off all their food supplies, and we'll starve them out of the mountains. And so during this time, it was very tough. They had to eat dates and barley to survive. And at this time, there was a sheikh named Sheikh Shakib Arsalan who began writing articles and spreading them out, sending them in Europe and in Arabia, and the Muslims started getting very hearts started coming to this side of the Libyans. Even some Europeans, they started siding with the Libyans, and in Arabia, they wanted to help the Libyans. So believe it or not, there's somebody, I never knew this, there's a man named Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, he was a Austrian convert. His father was Jewish rabbi. He became a convert to Islam, and he wrote a tafsir of the Qur'an, actually. Believe it or not, from Arabia, they sent Muhammad Asad, the Austrian blue-eyed guy, to go to Libya to meet Omar Mukhtar. So he got through the forest, he came up, and he said, I saw a man wrapped in white, and he looked so brave. And I talked to him, and I said, how are you doing? And he said, we want to help you. there's a land here, there's a city here, we can retreat to that city and we'll send supplies from Arabia. And Umar, he said, it's too late. The Italians, you don't know what they did? The Italians took the city, surrounded it, they bombarded it with the Air Force, they killed all of the men, they raped the women, they killed all the animals, and only one person or two they let it go to tell the story. And he said that at this point it's becoming more and more impossible. But so then he said, let's go to Egypt. We'll get you out of here, take you and the Mujahideen to Egypt. You can build up your strength and come back and fight the Italians. And Umar, he said, I'm going to fight or I'm going to die in the way of Allah. I'm not leaving my people. Why would I leave my land? So then Graziani, he continued his policies of starving them, and how was he captured? As usual, there was a informant, there was a betrayer. So Umar, he used to go out with 100 men at least. One day he went out with only 40 men. So the informants, they told the Italians, he's weak today. He doesn't have a lot of people guarding him. So he went to cross a river. And when to cross the river, you have to expose yourself to the enemies. So they saw him crossing the river, and then they came with all of their armored trucks, and his men tried to fight them off, and Umar himself was fighting them, but they hit him in the arm, and they killed his horse. And so the horse fell down, and his arm was crushed under his horse, and broke his arm. So then he had no way to fight. He pulled his arm, and his other arm was injured, and he ran up into the trees. But they saw him, and they didn't know who he was, but he was very famous at that time. He had been negotiating with them. They didn't realize who he was, but they captured him. And his men tried to come back and save him, but it was too hard. They fought them with machine guns. All of his men got killed. They wouldn't, and he was captured by Graziani, and they took him to Benghazi. Benghazi was their capital. And they said during he had to go by ship. They put him in chains, even though his arms were broken. You can see the pictures. You might see some pictures. He's wearing all of these chains, even though his arms are broken. And they tried to tell him, if you get your men to surrender, we'll give you leniency. We'll take care of you. He said, my men will never surrender. We're sworn to fight. Either we win or we die in the way of Allah. So they took him, and they had the head of the Graziani talks to him. He had some glasses that, if you saw the movie, these glasses, Graziani found them in one of the battles, and they said, this is Omar Al-Mukhtar's glasses. And he said, he showed it to him. He said, these are your glasses? He said, those are mine. Yes, I lost it in the battle. He said, I knew I was going to catch you one day and give you these. And then he told him, same thing. He tried to convince him to work with them, to co-opt him, and he refused. And so at his trial, very beautiful thing happened in the trial. His lawyer, he said, this man, he's fighting to save his land from his people. His religion tells him to stand up against the invaders. He's an Italian lawyer, but he's telling the court, he said, we have a law, but there's a greater law, which is the divine law, the law of God. And in the law of God, he's doing what's right. And the people were shocked to hear this, because it makes sense. Then they said, he's over 70 years old. He's an old man and completely white. What harm is he going to do? Just let him live in prison. And again, the crowd started shouting, and they got scared. Then the judge left immediately. And the judge came back and he said, we're going to execute him. He didn't, because it was true that he's a hero and he's doing what's right. So they, within 1 hour, they did the whole court. The whole court was done in 1 hour. And they took him to 9 o'clock in the morning, September 16th, 1931. They took him outside, and there was a huge crowd that was forced to come out. The Italians, anybody there in Benghazi, they forced them to come to watch the execution. And he was saying the Shahada, and he was walking with full bravery to the execution. And what the Italians did, they flew their airplanes because they didn't want the people to hear his words. So they flew their jets around to make a lot of noise and distraction, because this man was a hero. He had a hero status amongst the people, and even amongst the Europeans. They began to respect this man. And then they hung him at 9 o'clock on September 16th, 1931. So here, the last thing I want to share with us. I'm sorry if we went over a couple of minutes. Finish in 2 minutes, inshallah. What is the greatest lessons of Omar Al-Mukhtar? Number one, that he had a strong religious upbringing that gave him that tawheed, that Allah is with us, nobody can defeat us. And so he had that asceticism. You couldn't buy him. You know how these leaders today, they give them money and that's it. They do whatever they want. You couldn't buy him. They tried to give him houses, money, whatever he wanted. But because he had that training, the Sanusis, they have the training lodges, he grew up on the Qur'an. The Qur'an was his. And we see that in Gaza today, subhanAllah. They grew up on the Qur'an. They're dying in the hospital and they're saying shahada and they're praying, making dua. SubhanAllah, such strong iman. And he blended, religious authority with military leadership. And he was always in good spirits. And this is why the fighters were always happy with him, because he always had this trust in Allah, this deep trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look at this. He confronted the most modern military, jet planes, tanks, I don't know if they used missiles at that time, but all of the modern equipment with what? Horses and rifles, on their bare hands. Look at what the brothers are doing now in Gaza. By their bare hands, sometimes fighting a tank with their bare hands. Subhanallah. But he did it with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the last thing here, second to last, is the tribal support. He had the support of the people. They would provide food. They would give him information. The Italians are here. The Italians are there. So that gave them help. And the last thing is that his martyrdom, insisted to die in the land where he was. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to take the people in Gaza, send them to Sinai, send them to Egypt. No. He said, this is our land. We fight or we die here. We're not going to give it up. Subhanallah. So this was one of the great heroes of Islam. May Allah accept from him. Allah have mercy on him. And the last thing here, Sheikh Hamza last week, he talked about Andalus. So when I was in Spain and Andalus, I bought this sword here. So if you guys anybody want to see what they used to use, but I don't know how real this is. They really used this one, but it's called a two-handed sword because it's very heavy. Subhanallah. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah be pleased with Omar Al-Mukhtar, and may He make many more strong leaders for our ummah. May He bring us back to our religion in a beautiful way. May He give us liberation. May He help the people of Gaza. May He liberate the people of Gaza. May He liberate all oppressed people in every land. Ya Rabbil Alameen. O Allah, revive the iman in our hearts, Ya Allah, and take away the love of dunya from our hearts, the leaders, Ya Rabbil Alameen. O Allah, have mercy on the women and children of Gaza, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair.